Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe with Kay Cabot and Ashley Bastock. As I said on our group text earlier today, a rare off-season Sunday Orange and Brown Talk podcast. I guess this qualifies as an emergency podcast, in fact, because Myles Garrett, 2 days after we did a podcast about him just refusing to meet with Jimmy Haslam, Jimmy Haslam refusing to meet with Myles, things started to feel a little bit bleak. All of a sudden, Sunday morning, Myles Garrett agrees to a new extension. It runs through 2030, $40 million a year, $123.5 million in guarantees. He is the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, beating Max Crosby, who signed his $35.5 million extension earlier this week. I actually almost tweeted, quote tweeted a Max Crosby tweet with a GIF of Andrew Berry to Myles Garrett and then like a "you up" GIF or something like that. I guess I should have done that. Mary Kay, this was, as I said to our texters, how's this for a twist? That's what this felt like. This was like a movie twist here today.
Well, it really was. And it came together quickly on Friday night when Myles informed his agent, Nicole Lynn, who I got the chance to talk to today, and we will get to that. But he dialed up Nicole Lynn and basically said, I want to get this done. And he wanted to get it done before free agency starts tomorrow. The negotiating period opens tomorrow. He wanted that done. The dollars out there are starting to dry up. I think that he wanted to make sure that he got everything that he's worth and that he wanted. And he also wants to, according to Nicole, he wanted to help recruit free agents and help this football team. So here we are. It took about 36 hours for Nicole and Andrew to hammer this out. And I will say, I think there were a couple of things that happened over the past week that may have led to this turn of events. First of all, when Myles got turned down for the meeting by Jimmy Haslam, I think it really showed him that the Browns are in solidarity, so much so. They are in alignment, and they locked arms, and they basically said, we are not budging on this issue. And I think it really hit home for him that they were not going to change their minds, and that he was going to have to take it to the point where he would have to hold out and lose money, and it would get ugly, and that he would potentially lose more and more fans because fans were starting to turn on Myles Garrett. You would think in a situation like that everybody would be against Jimmy Haslam for not taking the meeting, but there was a lot of support for Jimmy in not taking a meeting with Myles that would have been out of the chain of command and not the way business is done. So I think that was a big issue. And then I also think that so many things happened in the defensive end market last week that helped lead to this moment. And that was Trey Hendrickson received permission to go out from the Bengals and seek a trade. Maybe he's not getting out there what he really thought. I heard him say yesterday that there's nowhere else he'd rather be than Cincinnati. So not sure about that. And then you saw a bunch of guys starting to get out there on the market, just get released. Jonathan Allen is out there. Joey Bosa is out there. Harold Landry is out there. Today, Von Miller is out there. So you see these guys ending up on the market, and Myles probably thought, I have a football team that's willing to make me the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of the NFL. And actually, I think it was my story today saying that they might get Joe Flacco. No, just kidding.
You know what's funny? I actually almost tweeted that. I almost tweeted out, Myles heard the Joe Flacco rumors and immediately was like, sign me up.
Exactly. A football team that is trying to find a good bridge quarterback that can come in here and start some football games until that rookie is ready. Which rookie? Maybe Cam Ward, maybe Shedeur Sanders. But I think that Myles realized, you know what? This might just be the best spot for me, especially if they are willing to give me $40 million a year.
Yeah, Ashley, I wrote this in my reaction column. $40 million a year makes it very easy to put on rose-colored glasses when it comes to looking at this Browns plan. Now, I also I don't think the Browns are like this hopeless situation. So I'm sure when Myles stepped back and took an honest look at this team, he had to realize, look, they might not be the Eagles or the Lions, or they might not be a team that's ready to go to the Super Bowl this year, but they're not hopeless, and there's a path forward. There's a way for this team to kind of get back to where they want to get back to pretty quickly. And then you throw in that $40 million a year, and it's you know what? I think I can buy into whatever this plan is.
Yeah, we've been saying this all along, ever since this trade request was a possibility. And it's this idea of, oh, money doesn't matter until suddenly it does. And we've brought up the Deshaun Watson of it all as being the prime example of that, too, even a few years ago. So I do think that ultimately, and I'm going to be writing my take on all of this, essentially in this direction, by getting this done now, you've essentially minimized the drama. And I was laughing listening back to our Friday podcast. And Dan, when you and I were going back and forth on this idea of, oh, is it going to be too much of a distraction? Should you just get him out of the building? And I made the throwaway comment about, well, unless you get a deal done this weekend or something, I think we're going to spend a lot of time asking these young guys about this idea of, oh, Myles doesn't think you guys can win or good enough. How does that make you feel? Blah, blah, blah. So as Mary Kay said, by holding firm, by holding the ranks, the Browns, I think, showed how serious they were about this, number one. And by getting a deal done before free agency even really starts, I think that's the best possible avenue. And like you wrote, Mary Kay, this idea that he wants to help recruit free agents or whatever, I think there is a path forward. I think people have very short memories. We saw it with Lamar Jackson a couple of years ago, right? And he wanted out of Baltimore so badly, and you come back and almost all is forgiven. So I am curious about the residual effects of this, but I do think really for as dramatic as it had gotten, and it seemed like we were on the precipice of a lot more drama, we've all been pulled back from the ledge here, and now everyone can work on moving forward. It's early enough in the year, right before the start of the new league year, that I think a lot of the damage has surprisingly been minimized. And if you would have told me that 48 hours ago, I would have been shocked that we would be here less than 48 hours later.
How much credit does Andrew Berry deserve here, Mary Kay? Because on the one hand, he held firm, never wavered on his messaging, had the organization in line with him, right? All the way to the point where Jimmy Haslam was like, no, I'm not going to meet with you. You have to talk to Andrew. Everyone was in lockstep. And ultimately, before the league year even starts, he gets this deal done. On the other hand, it was kind of just, hey, here's $40 million a year. I don't want to say that that's not hard to hammer out one of these deals, but also, how hard is that to just say to Myles, here's some life-changing money that sets records and makes you the highest paid non-quarterback ever. But how much credit does Andrew get for kind of how this all played out?
Well, I think he handled it very, very well from start to finish. He never wavered. He stuck to his guns. He resisted the temptation to perhaps let Myles go out and seek a trade, right? Because that would have been easy. I, by Friday, had advocated that because I thought maybe Myles needed a reality check to see that perhaps there wasn't going to be $40 million from another team floating around out there. Or maybe another team wasn't going to be willing to give the Browns what they were going to ultimately cave for in a trade. So that was sort of the method to my madness, but they were willing to let it get as ugly as it had to. You had Myles out there just as recently as a couple of days ago. Their camp was telling Tom Pelissero of NFL Network that he was prepared to sit out games. But the Browns never blinked. They never, ever blinked. Once again, they presented that united front. And even to a man, Kevin Stefanski, what did he say at the NFL Combine? He 100% said, I expect Myles to be here this year and in future years. So they knew what they were doing on this. And in the past, there wasn't that kind of solidarity in the organization or alignment in the organization. And when you have that, it's a great foundation upon which to build. And you could be in a lot worse places right now. I wouldn't have said that in 2016. or 2017. They were a mess back then. But now they are aligned. And in matters such as these, this is where you see how it absolutely really comes in handy. Now, having said that, it's really easy to get someone's attention with $40 million a year. $40 million a year. Now, let me say something about this $40 million a year. One might argue, hey, why did they feel they had to go so much above Max Crosby, who became the highest paid non-quarterback last week when he made 35.5, I think it is, from the Raiders? Well, here's why. Because the edge rusher market, by the time the season begins, is going to get to 40. And that's what I heard at the Super Bowl. That's what I've been writing. That's the number that I've been using. If you look at anything that I've written over the past month, it's always been $40 million because that's the number that I've always been told that this was going to get to with Aiden Hutchinson and whoever else is going to be up next, Micah Parsons. That's what these guys are going to get. So you couldn't give Myles 36 right now just to get him above Max Crosby. That was not going to cut it. In order to get this thing done now, they had to go and give him the top of market contract. Now, the other players will probably meet it. I don't know if anyone's going to necessarily exceed it. Maybe someone will, but this is why they had to go to 40 instead of just topping Max at 36 or 37.
Yeah, we've talked about this on the podcast before. You reset the market until you don't. It's always the next guy up. So this contract seems like a lot now. In 3 years, it's not going to seem like maybe as much. And then there might come another point. Think about the quarterback market, right? The Deshaun Watson contract seemed like a ton. And it was, obviously, and there was a full guarantee. But just the yearly average seemed like a ton. And now that's been dwarfed. And then guess what? If the Browns draft a quarterback and that guy ends up being their franchise guy and they have to pay him in 3 years, they're going to pay way more than they did Deshaun Watson. So the market's always resetting. And so this is just the latest market resetting deal. I think you're right, Mary Kay. I don't know if we'll see people surpass this. Although I guess the Bengals, I saw a Bengals writer tweet that they've said they want to make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. So that's an interesting wrinkle in all of this. Not an edge rusher, obviously, but a wide receiver. But yeah, people might approach it. They might not surpass it, but eventually it is going to get surpassed, whether it's this year, next year, 2 years from now, whatever it is. So that's obviously a big piece of this. Ashley, how much credit do you give Andrew Berry? I think there's something to be said too about not just alignment, but these guys all trust each other. Like Kevin and Jimmy and everyone else in the organization trusted Andrew when he decided we're not budging.
Yeah, I think that's where I give Andrew and the organization just so much credit. And you guys have obviously covered the much more tumultuous years of this team. And it feels like in years past, this is a situation that chaos would have been lurking around every corner in terms of this team just not being on the same page. And again, you guys saw it with coaches and front offices arguing with each other and ownership not being on the same page with either of them. Like, this could have gotten so much uglier if it was happening 5 to 8 years ago, I think, versus right now. So that ability that Andrew, this front office has to just kind of hold down the fort, keep things steady, I think you do get a lot of credit. At the same time, you had to throw down a record-breaking amount of money to get it done. So it's not like that was necessarily any groundbreaking tactic that they used to placate Myles and get everyone on the same page in that regard. But I do think where I give Andrew in this front office the most credit is just remaining level-headed. It seemed like no matter who we talked to, no matter what the situation was from December 20th onward, that the Browns were never really outwardly rattled by this. And I don't think they were that inwardly rattled by this either. And I think ultimately that's what helped them get this deal done today. But at the same time, when you talk about the deal itself, it's like, oh yeah, you threw a bunch of money at him. Like, of course, that's going to placate eventually when the number gets big enough. So while that part of it's not groundbreaking, I think the fact that they were able to hold it together, remain a cohesive front, that's where most of the credit is for me.
So, Mary Kay, obviously, we've talked so much about the money, and the money certainly talked in this situation. And I think a lot of people out there are going to say this was just always about the money. That's all this was about. I don't personally believe that. I do think that there was at least a time, and maybe even recently, when Myles Garrett did genuinely want out, when he genuinely wanted to try and go play for a contender. You talked to his agent Nicole Lynn today when you were writing your story, and she said he had a change of heart. Again, that $40 million probably helped, but I do think I don't think this was just a ruse by Myles Garrett. I do genuinely think when we go back to when he first put out this request, when he was doing the Radio Row interviews, that he genuinely wanted out. And again, the money helps, but I think he also probably looked around the landscape, like you were saying earlier, like maybe there just isn't that situation I want right now. And I do think it's interesting there's a no trade clause in this too, because that at least gives, if we reach another impasse in 2 or 3 years, that at least gives Myles a little control over where he goes if he can convince the Browns to trade him. So I thought that was an interesting wrinkle. But I do think this is more than just, well, hey, he was just looking for money. Obviously, money helped. But I do think that he genuinely wanted out of here.
I think so too. I don't think that he would have gone so footballs to the wall on his desire to get out of here so vocally, so adamantly, if he didn't really mean it. Them's fighting words that you now have to get out from under. Okay. And I think that's an important point that we need to talk about here too. And that is, how is Myles going to mend the fences with a fan base that feels a little bit damaged in this whole process, like collateral damage of this? Like their emotions have been so played with over the last month to the point where he's gone, he's not coming back, he's out of here. And now all of a sudden he's back and we have to just love him the way that we always did. And I think they will. I think the fan base will forgive him. It's a forgiving town. And the minute he starts sacking the quarterback and ripping the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands and helping the Browns get to winning, then I think all will be forgiven. But I do think that I don't know who may have advised him in his world or in his circle to go so heavy on the no, I just want out of here. It's not about the money. It's not about that. Because I will tell you what, even though we did not believe that, we didn't believe it. You can go back and listen to every single podcast that we have done on this topic, and we have said it from minute one until now. We always felt like Myles would be back in a Cleveland Browns uniform on opening day. I just said it on Sirius XM radio a day or two ago as well. And the host was incredulous, like could not believe that I actually thought that. Because the Nationals, they bought it, that this had nothing to do with money and that Myles just wanted out of this horrible, horrible place. Well, I think we know better that this isn't a horrible, horrible place right now. It has been a horrible, horrible place to be, but it's not right now. They fell on hard times last year, and they do have to reshuffle, retool, and all of those re's, but not rebuild. They are not in a major rebuild mode if, and it's a big if they can find a quarterback who can step in this year and win some games for them. And again, that's not an easy thing to do. They're in the process of trying to figure that out right now. And one of the reasons it's difficult is because you have to find the sweet spot between finding a quarterback that can come in and win for you if they need him to start half the season or the full season or whatever the case may be, and also someone who isn't going to stomp their feet and scream if they get benched for the rookie, which could easily happen. So they've got to find somebody who is cool with the role. And I don't know if there's a huge pool of players that are in that category. But if they can find a quarterback, if they end up drafting Cam Ward and Cam Ward turns out to be some facsimile of one of these rookie quarterbacks from 2024 that was able to step in and win some football games for you, then this can turn around to the point where maybe they win 8 games, maybe they challenge for 9, Maybe they flirt with a wild card spot this year, maybe. Or they find a veteran quarterback who can come in here and also win some games for you. Because if you've got Jerry Jeudy and you add to the receiver pile and David Njoku comes back healthy and you add another running back, and we know Joel is back and Jack's still here and Ethan and Wyatt, you can win some games if you don't turn the ball over 34 times like they did last year. If you just cut those turnovers in half, you're up to 6 victories right there, maybe 7. So they just need to find a quarterback who can play some clean ball. They need to run the ball. They need to take some pressure off their defense, but they can get back to winning to a degree this year. And I do think that that Myles did want to win and he did want to go somewhere. I think he talked to people like LeBron James, who left Cleveland and went out and got themselves a championship or two. But I think as time went along, Myles realized that just maybe his best chance to get the money and a crack at winning in addition to that might be here.
Yeah, and I think too, like so much of the discussion that got lost, especially from like the national level, was like, first of all, it was going to cost the Browns. Like if the Browns traded Myles Garrett, it was completely prohibitive to anything they want. Like the minute they trade Myles Garrett, it becomes a teardown because it would have put 36 million dead cap. You'd have been done. Like there was nothing you could have done there. Now they could have waited till after June 1st. Obviously, we've talked about those scenarios, but then also like this isn't the NBA. The NFL is designed to limit player movement. Like that's just what it is. That's how the CBA is set up. That's how the league has set this all up. He had 2 years left on his deal. You can franchise tag him, right? They could have done that for 2 years. Like he was not he didn't have the leverage to go anywhere if the Browns didn't want to move him. And it felt like this discussion all along just ignored a lot of those simple facts. Like maybe Myles didn't want to be here, but it kind of wasn't up to Myles. He just didn't have the kind of leverage he needed. Obviously, look, he could have dragged this out and sat out games and whatever, but the Browns seemed like they were, if it was going to get to that point, it seemed like they were okay letting that happen. So um, I think that was lacking in the conversation. And then again, it did become this idea of like, oh my God, Cleveland is just a barren wasteland. And I mean, I think you guys know I am probably more pessimistic about this roster and this team next year than you guys are. But at the same time, like I know this, they're gonna have a chance to add a young, exciting quarterback. They're gonna have a chance to add a lot of young talent to this roster. They're going to be able to do a little something in free agency, maybe not a ton, but they'll be able to have a very targeted free agency. And absolutely, this team can set themselves up with whatever happens next year happens, but they can set themselves up for 2026 and beyond to kind of get back to where they want to be. So if they win 6 games next year, or if they make that wild card run next year, great. But if they do this right, you can really parlay all of that into something big moving forward. So I do think the narrative around the Browns and kind of what this team is and kind of where they are, I think got blown out of proportion a little bit.
Well, and here is the funny part about that to me is the new league year hasn't even started yet. So when Myles is out there, and when I have said before why I thought it was more likely in all of this for Myles to still be a Brown, and between the two sides, why it seemed like if one of them was going to have an about face or change their mind, that it would be from the Myles side of things, is because the Browns haven't even begun to operate in terms of free agency and trades and the draft. Like all of those things are upcoming. I mean, free agency is going to really begin. Recording this on Sunday. Tomorrow is when the negotiating period begins, and the new league year begins on Wednesday. So when Myles in the middle of this was so adamant about, I want to go somewhere to win, in the back of my mind, I was always like, okay, but what about all these moves they could potentially make? Like, how can you say that when you don't even have all of that evidence for the upcoming season in front of you yet? So I always thought that was interesting about this narrative too, and this national narrative of, oh, why would he want to stay there? It must be so bad. Like, we haven't even given them a chance to operate and correct, really, in terms of personnel roster post 3-14. So there's still plenty of other things they could do. We've talked about it. And that to me was also like the interesting part of that narrative about, oh, gosh, it must be so bad there.
Yeah, and well, that's too where this gets interesting. And I think, look, there's always pressure on you as a GM and a head coach in the NFL, but this is where it starts to get interesting now. It's like, okay, the Browns got through this. Now go execute this plan, right? If you got something big up your sleeves that nobody's expecting and you're going to turn yourself into a Super Bowl contender this year, go do it. Or if it's a little bit of a longer runway where you're going to restock a little bit, try and win next year, but you're really building this thing for the next 3 or 4 years where you can really start winning in 26, 27, 28, like do that. But now it's like, okay, Andrew, you took care of this. You got one of the biggest pieces of your plan back. Now the pressure's really on to go execute this.
Yeah, it's a tall order because I did a quarterback story that I put up this morning, talking about what the landscape is for these veteran bridge quarterbacks. And the pickings are kind of slim. And if you are not going to be starting your rookie, you really do have to be reasonably sure that this veteran bridge can win games for you. And I think that's tricky. I don't see a whole bunch of quarterbacks in the category of stepping in and winning. Now, some of the ones that we kind of thought would be in that category have already been on the move or are already slated to go somewhere else. Geno Smith ended up with the Raiders. Now, would they have gone that surefire starter route? I don't even know if they would have done that. Geno Smith is going to make a big number. He's getting paid. Sam Darnold is getting paid. So you're really not going out and trying to get a quarterback necessarily like that, a surefire starter. You're trying to find somebody. So I think it's tricky. You have to find somebody who can win, but isn't viewed that way around the league. Otherwise, they would be going out and signing a big multi-year deal with somebody else. So I don't know who this quarterback is going to be, but I would be thinking right now, I personally would be expanding the search to a potential full-time starter for 2025. I don't care if you trade for him. I don't care if you overpay for him in free agency. I don't care what you do. But because you don't know yet who you are ending up with the number 2 pick in the draft or later, if you really do plan to win as many games as possible in 2025, then I think you have to find a quarterback that can go out and win those football games for you. And maybe they think that's Joe Flacco. I'm sure Joe Flacco would love to come here. Joe Flacco went 2-4 last year. He turns the ball over a lot. I think they have to be a little bit careful about that. If he still fancies himself a full-time starter, is he going to be as good for a rookie as you need him to be? I think it's a tough call. I don't know who they're going to end up with, but I think it should almost be someone like, I don't even know if I can name somebody. I don't even know if I can think of the perfect guy.
You know what? I actually, I'm gonna disagree here. I think they should go into the year, and maybe they can't say this. I think they should go into the year planning to start the player they draft, unless it's a like trade down. We're taking one of the second tier guys, but I think if they end up with Cam or Shador, these guys have both started a ton of football games in college, and I think like starting those guys from week one, I think is fine. And there's going to be growing pains, but I'm like Jaden Daniels started from week one. Bo Nix started from week one. JJ McCarthy probably would have started from week one had he not gotten hurt. I actually don't have an issue with if you take one of these two guys at number 2, because this isn't like Mitch Trubisky or somebody who didn't play any college football or, whatever, who played like 12 games. These guys have played a lot of football already. So I would actually be comfortable with starting a rookie week 1.
Well, I wouldn't have a problem with it either, except for the fact that they don't know who they're going to get yet at number 2. And we don't know yet if they feel comfortable enough with Shedeur at number 2 to even pick him there. So if Cam goes number 1 and they're not 100% sold or sure on Shedeur, I'm going to get tongue twisted here. Then you might be looking at doing something a little bit later. And you just don't know this yet. You don't know the answer to this yet. I wouldn't have hey, if they draft Cam Ward, throw him in there in week 1. And to a certain extent, if they feel that way about Shedeur Sanders and they take him at number 2, I agree with you 100%. But at this moment in time, I don't think they know yet who their quarterback is going to be. And in the event that they end up with one that needs a little seasoning, I think they have to be ready to go on opening day with someone who can win games for them, or you start to lose the team. I think they need a winning quarterback on the field in week 1. If it's the rookie, I'm totally cool with that. But in the event that you're drafting maybe a Jalen Milroe or a Jackson Dart and you're not sure if he's ready to start yet, then I do think that you have to have someone other than a Bailey Zappi waiting in the wings. I think you have to have an experienced veteran quarterback that fans can get excited about, that Myles can get excited about, that other players, that Jerry Jeudy can get excited about, in the event that your rookie, whoever he may be, just is not ready yet.
Yeah, I do it. Like, I'm with you. I think we're on the same page on it. Like, if Jalen Milroe's the guy, I don't think we want Jalen Milroe starting from week 1. Even a Jackson Dart, maybe you could argue. You don't want him starting week 1. But Ashley, this just sounds to me like Aaron Rodgers is coming to town.
Let's do it.
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I think that would shock me, right? I'm like, what else could this team do that would shock me right now? I think that would still shock me. I personally am not aboard the Aaron Rodgers train. I guess I could try and talk myself into it if I had a little bit more time. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of where I land between you guys, I guess I'm more on Mary Kay's side in the sense that I need to know who the guy is first. I need to know who the guy is before I'm like, start him right away as the younger guy or get the vet and throw him in there first. So it's tough for me without knowing the people.
What about Russell Wilson? What would you guys think of a Russell?
I would say
start
this.
Russ. I would say start Russ.
I would go with him. I would pursue him.
I was thinking about this on my run on Saturday. Like, because, Kirk Cousins has been linked to the Browns, obviously, and we don't know where that situation is going. But even if he became available, I actually would rather have Russell Wilson. And I don't think Russell Wilson is going to take you to, like, the Super Bowl. But you could start Russell Wilson for half a season if you wanted to and then hand the keys over. Or you could get through a full season with Russ. Like, I would be fine with Russ.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what the Falcons did last year, we know that they signed Kirk Cousins to a blockbuster deal, and they also drafted Michael Penix at number 8. And now they find themselves in somewhat of a financial pickle over all of that. And Kirk wants out. He wants to go somewhere and start and play. He knows he could probably come here and get that opportunity, and he wants it. So I do think that the Browns could do something like that, where you get a starting caliber veteran quarterback and also take your rookie, potentially still at number 2, maybe trade back a little bit now, and maybe you end up with a Travis Hunter and a Jalen or a Jackson or somebody like that. So there are a number of ways that you can go about this. But if you land a Russell or a Kirk or someone like that, then maybe, just maybe, it frees you up for some other things, and everyone could get excited about having a veteran that can win and a rookie that can potentially win. Jimmy G. I haven't even studied Jimmy G lately. I mean, we all know that I've studied Jimmy G plenty in years past and was all aboard the Jimmy G train. I mean, he's somebody that's on the list. He's got to be on the list right now. So these are the caliber of quarterbacks that have that kind of experience that I think that you should bring one of those guys in here. And if you need to start them on opening day to get this party started right, do it.
Well, the biggest part of the plan, at least to this point, is in place. Obviously, the quarterback's going to end up being very important, but they've got if you're going to execute this plan, having Myles Garrett in there to help you kickstart it is a big thing. So Myles Garrett, the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, our emergency podcast here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Find us on YouTube. It's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. On Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk. And if you're not a Football Insider subscriber, we texted you this morning when this happened, and I was in there. I was texting with our texters. I was going back and forth with some people, answering questions and all that stuff. So cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. And of course, cleveland.com/Browns is where you can find all of our Browns coverage. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.